Okay, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'll tell you some new stuff I've been doing about the evolution, basically. We heard a little bit yesterday on the context of neural networks. I think we're going to talk in the context of proteins. So the idea that comes is basically, if you remember our basic idea of protein folding funnels, you have the idea that it's a random heteropolymer. Since you have interactions that are random, you have lots of minima, that low energy minima, that come from rogue interactions that are structurally different, right? And finding the minima here is a big problem because we have an enormous search problem, but not only, even if you find it, it's a relevant problem because I change more or less the condition of the proteins, I do mutation, I do one thing, this is going to go up, this one comes down, everything goes. So proteins, as we come up with the final idea, you have to have one minima dominating over the other minimas. It's the principle of frustration when you want the stability of one state to dominate over all the traps. And the way you achieve that comes with the funnel picture that everybody has presented, I think, for a long time, is that basically in most proteins, the negative interactions, the contacts that you have on the data state are dominant over non-negative interactions. Okay, structure-based models is the ideal of this, but it is a very dominant factor. So because of these things, if you have a structure of the protein, you can predict a lot of the dynamics, the function, and stuff like that, because you have a good representation of the landscape of the proteins. Now, the problem is, we did a lot of work on that, a lot of unfolding. Here's the first case with the unfolding, for example. This is a very old story in CI2, where here we predict the transition state for folding into that protein. What's the top of the barrier to folding? And the sort of structure-based models are able to predict that, agree with experiments. That means all these points here, there's a contact map of a protein, and the color points, the color tells you what the probability of the native contacts, you have all of them, to exist on the transition state. So here we predict that the transition state of the small protein is the alpha helix plus this mini core here, and the success of the model here doesn't come because the conditions are great, comes from the fact that these proteins are so well selected that almost any model can predict this transition state. Okay? But this is just a motivation for what I want to present. But before I do the motivation, since we have doing propaganda, we actually have all these models available. They are great, a lot of people are using. We have a fantastic website, it's maintained by myself and Whitford and Northeastern. And you can use and enjoy all the scenes and do all these models. So at this point, before I continue forward, there are a lot of people that say topology control folding is actually the other way around. Proteins do such a good job on optimizing their energy that what's left is the geometry of the protein. There's lots you can do about it. And again, when you use that to say sort of structure-based models, or what people call low models, doesn't mean the proteins are like that. All that means is both the pathways and the nature of transition states and the nature of function, the geometric effects dominate over the energetic effects. Since we have this domination, I'm not saying the other one is perfect, but the simplified model is able to help us. There's a problem, however. The problem we have is not for every protein. We have all this structural information. We are not in the structural prediction business. So unless I have a structure of the protein, there's nothing I can do. So the question is, can I help myself and find additional structural information for cases where that structural information is not available? And that's where you move along by looking at genomic data to go after that. So for people that have an idea, here's sort of your evolution map. Zen can give my lecture dash, is much more of an expert than I am here. But the bottom line is, we start to observe that there's a lot of structural conservation moving through evolution. So the idea is, if we follow the sequence through evolution, can we extract that structural information? Okay, so that was the idea that started with it. And in order to do that, you're not looking just on residue conservation, but you're looking at covariance, pairs of residue conservation. In a sense, they make a contact, we go after covariance. And we heard a little bit of talk talk yesterday. So just to make this idea a little bit more exciting, let's put it this way. And here, just not to forget, this work, the current work is just in Houston, but started on Onuchic very well. The postdoc from Marcus actually is the one in the group that most of this work, just became an assistant professor in Dallas, started his own group, and these are the other people that have been involved on this work in the last few years. So what I mean is, you have a full protein, during evolution you have a mutation. If that mutation is unfavorable, you don't like to do what the protein does, or go backward and do what we call compensatory mutation. So by covariance, we can see that basically here in the case, residues sort of move together, and you start to figure out how these variations go together. Okay? So that's it. Now, why people haven't used that before? They have. But there's an interesting thing when we learn from physics, the fact that basically, first there's a problem. Mutual information, you can covariance has been for a long time. However, mutual information is the same as interaction is direct, or it's indirect, they gave a certain residue. And actually that was a problem. I'm going to show you that for you. And if you can do something better about it, you do something better about it. And also you have very little data available before. Now we have what has changed. First, there's lots of data. There are lots of sequences. Also, people in genomics have in our life basically as look at these things. The concept of protein family came out, just put PFAM here. You can have your own political orientation and go to whatever you want here. But the bottom line is, there are things that are much easier to align these families, so it's much better to do data. Also, I'm going to talk about global statistical models. If you want to get direct information, you cannot just have pairwise information. You have to have global statistics that's able to differentiate a direct pair from a pair that negates by a third one. So there are methods for that. You heard from Lehigh yesterday, but the method we have here is basically the same idea. I'm just going to tell you what happens. So, to disentangle these things, we create this method that we call DCA, direct coupling analysis. And the goal of the method is, if we can get this information, right? You get basically here information here, we try to get direct information how much this context is likely to happen. So this direct information here, if you look, is just let's continue. Let's try one more time. Okay, so but like I was talking, I'll go a little bit in details now, right? But just the idea is, if I can find this direct coupling, then I have sort of this direct information, the confirmation theory that pretty much is just P log P, normalized by the fact that the different amino acids have different probabilities, right? But it's nothing more than that. But how do I actually do that? Okay? So let's do a little bit about it. So just for people we have here, let's be 2 minutes of very simple comments. So basically, the input data to get this equation here is basically we start by getting the local probability. We need to see how much each amino acid is. So when you line all the sequences, you try to figure out for each line what's the probability of each amino acid. Okay? In addition to this information, now the next part is to try to get the probability of pairs of amino acids. So if you look on the sequence here, just for fun, basically, you look that if I only had 6 sequences, I had the probability of having S and P on position 6 and 17. Here will be 2, 6. So how do you do that? It's a lot of counting. I always love to remember Michael Fisher that always says that anything in statistical physics is counting, complicated counting, but just counting. Okay, so basically, so you're doing a lot of counting here. Now, you heard a little bit about that. How can I go to a global probability from only if I only have pairwise information, right? So that's what we do in physics. And the maximum entropy principle tells us that given a certain amount of information, everything else should go to maximum entropy. However, and get the best possible joint distribution. However, remember, the best may not be good enough. Right? So remember that, basically. That's tells you that with that data, that's the best to do, but it's our job to show that actually this is a good result. And then, remains the fact that expected higher order correlations are actually input on two levels. On a pairwise formation, you heard yesterday that if we get the same global probability distribution you saw yesterday from Illinois, the difference is she got an IC model because it had 0 and 1. I got a plus model because it had 20 kinds of amino acids. Okay? But it's the same model, and you have to minimize this equation. The problem is when you start with this job, what I was going to address is that you know that the answer has to be in this form, and now you have to do an inverse problem to get the best probability distribution that satisfies all these conditions. The trouble is this can be a hell of a problem, and at that time we were discussing with a lot of people, and one person forgot to put there was Martin White. Martin White and Farouk started to work a lot into this problem, and they noticed a very simple thing. Actually, if you solve this problem, when I'm in field approximation, and I have a couple of slides, this energy is actually come from the inverse covariance matrix. And that's easy to compute. Okay? There are lots of papers coming out now saying, oh, there's some boundaries, you're not great on that. But we have tried all of them. They're much more expensive, and they're not getting better results than we do. So that allows us, may not satisfy a lot of hardcore theoreticians, but it's an application, maybe this method available for us to go after many sequences. So this idea is where simple physics idea can really help you to go after it. Let me be a little more precise with these terms here. Here are the terms I want people to remember. Here is again the Potts probability distribution for the Potts model. The direct information is exactly this amount, and let me give you the parameters one more time. Okay, so with that in mind, have a look at it. This is our early results. Why do we think these models are very good? This is a very simple protein, but it works for many other proteins. If you look here, we're comparing context predicted by DI and by mutual information. The red context should be the other way around. The red context are the good context. And the green ones is what we call here our false positives. Not only here it tells you that the direct information is better than all these. This is just conventional mutual information. Here is some Bayesian dependence to help a little bit, but we do better than in our method. But more than doing better, one result that amazes us, and I can go over time to explain, is that we get much more distributed contexts over it. So it's not just the number of contexts you get. If you have a structure, you want to distribute over it, and if I have enough context distributed, I can really work on predicting structure. So it turned out to be a great method. Now, more than that, I want to show one other thing for you here. Here's the contact map. Here's a particular protein. Here is the negative state. Okay? Here's a projection of what we call our predict context and our false positives. And you can see actually that even the false positives, they're not exactly right, but most of them are around where they should be. So we really have a good prediction in the structure. Okay? Why they're around? Maybe many reasons. Maybe you don't have enough sequences. Actually, for this method to be successful, we need about 1,000 independent sequences. That's when that's really good. We have been able, if we know more or less, we're going to lose 100, but things start that ugly very fast. And that's why now having data is very important. But you see how well it does. But I want to continue. So you looked at basically, we do a great job with the structure. Actually, we have this paper on that we do structure prediction. It's not our job to do structure prediction, but basically we have decisions, very good predictions. If you give me the local information, you can almost get entire tertiary information from these methods. You get enough context that when you have this information, it does a great model. But there's another thing that became when you observe data. One thing I like is this one. Is the next one. Here's the contact map. Here is the fact that so what do you do here? Basically, are these real contacts? So have a look. We know 5 magnitude, these are real tertiary contacts. Actually, the ones around A and from here, they're also true contacts, they're just water separated contacts. And then there's back to make some mistake, right? However, there's one thing that bugs me. I have no problem about not being perfect, but we really got annoyed with this bump up here. What I mean is, it's big enough to be a signal, right? It's not like a, okay? And if you look here, it's really a strong signal that you're getting. So one thing we're learning with this method is that the more we use, the more we trust. Things that give high direct information is very hard for us to be there for no reason. They cannot be direct contact. So in this particular case, I will show the example basically. This is basically pair of residues. If you have a look, this is a false positive. These things are too far, they're more than 8 angstrom apart on this particular protein. But when you start to investigate, this thing actually forms a multimer, okay? And you notice these are contacts between two sequences. So when you look at DCA data, it's great that I don't give you the single structure, but if you have a signal there, start to think, is there another reason for that? This is the first time. This was a great thing because I didn't like to have that strong signal and say, oh, this is just a mistake of the method. Right? There's some signal coming out from the information, and this tells you that basically DCA can go beyond just the structure prediction, but can predict contacts that may have, they may exist on other conformations, they may be on conformation, they're functional conformation, never stay structure, but they may exist for functional reasons, and we have to use them for all these applications. So this is sort of a great story that makes us very happy on thinking about this problem. Okay. This is our first paper that's basically on materials involved. It's a paper that pissed me off enormously, because one of those papers that we had the result on for 6 months, but people kept, we have to check, are we counting enough sequences, are we doing these things? And the bottom line is we published together with experimental data, and we had a perfect prediction of this structure. We could have published 6 months before the experimental structure came out, top flux. So these are the things that you have to learn in life, how much should be that precise, how much speed up, that's one of those that. But this one thing we're doing a lot of these things here now is we're getting information from single structures, and we're getting protein conformations out of this information from DCA. Okay, so it's a great, powerful method, and what I'm going to do in the next 10 minutes I have here to finish is to give you some examples of what I have been doing. And when I talk with my 10 minutes, I talk with examples. Here's a very simple example that I think this is very simple. This is very simple. It's a very simple conformational motion. But what we're saying is, what happens when we have functional proteins and people don't have all the active conformations? You have one crystal structure, but you want to know all the functional states. So what we're learning is getting one structure and building the Hamiltonian on the top of it with DCA can give you a lot of information. This is a very simple case, and I'm going to show you a more complicated case. This is just good to visualize. Basically, have a look on this particular case. You have a look here. Basically, here's the open structure, here's the closed structure. Here are all the contacts, and there are differences between them, right? There are the closed structure, but not only the open structure. And if I compare that, you observe that the DCA pairs provide information here. So what I do is, I do my DCA, I remove all the monomer contacts, and I see what's my signal left over. On the other days, we call that error. Here we now start to call that signal, and you see that that signal gives us information about the closed state. So when I do the Hamiltonian now, makes us very happy. Here is what I want to show. Let me just go back here. This Hamiltonian, you see that basically, this Hamiltonian, when we have the structure-based model for the monomer, built with the DCA data in the top of it, right? But my structure-based model now, that's what I said at the beginning. I don't have all the structure information in my system. So now I use the genome data to build, right? All the DCA pairs we believe. And what we observe now is that we have the closed and the open structure here out of this equation. Just to give you an example, the other one is just the control. That's basically, if I add the same number of contacts at random, I just end up with just the open state. So sort of one of great, but this is a particular nicer result because this is a case where people have the open and closed structure. Some people have guessed that maybe you have this structure. Nobody ever saw that structure. But we have that twisted structure. There's a strong signal in our DCA model when we do the clusters. We end up with 3 clusters here. Okay? And that's where this particular right bonds binding protein. And then if you go to the literature, they actually all these gaps. There's no structural information. But there's in many papers in the past where people comment that structure is possible. So now it's a very nice thing. Because not only you have a prediction, but you have a signal. So you say, oh, maybe it's just fantasy, but clearly there's an evolutionary signature there. And you're seeing that, and I think that's what we think the best can do for functional reasons. Now, what we have decided to do now is try to do protein-protein interaction. It's a great thing to do. Particularly, you know that most of the functional protein coupled systems, they tend to be basically homologous, right? So how do we deal with the place of homologous? So again, this much the idea I told you before to a higher limit. So what you're doing here is we do DCA on the monomer. You have the monomer. You have the structure for the monomer, but you don't have the structure for the diamond. Remove all the contacts that belong to the monomer. You can do a little bit more if you want, improve, you want to make sure that what's left over are contacts on the surface. So you can do a little bit more pruning. There's markers, but not necessary here. And then, with the leftover, you add that to Hamiltonian and you try to log these 2 proteins. Actually, Farouk and Ricardo, that was his student from Brazil there, had a very great idea. When we start to try to log proteins, the problem is how do you bring them together? Do I put a Gaussian potential? What happens if they come with the wrong orientation? There's a lot of problems of creating traps, even when you have these interactions. So they had a very clever idea we're using now, and it's a very, very efficient idea. So what we start is, you look at these contacts. These are contacts that come from DCA. We add them for these proteins to interact. But instead of starting with what we have, but the contact the right distance, all 6 and all these things, what we do is we have the same potential, but we start with a very long range and a very big basin. So you start to attract yourself to that way. And here's just something you have calibrate over a group of about 50 proteins. Then we start to reduce until you get the physical number that's about 4 angstrom and about a 1.5 angstrom base. But we use the same DCA contact to bring the proteins together. And they start to align in the right way because they're driven by these contacts. Right? So it's basically, it's a non-physical simulation, but a great simulation to bring these proteins together and do these things. Then we don't have to cheat by creating Gaussian potential and bring these together and hope they do. And we're amazed how basically, with a little bit of calibration, we're getting great results. And, oops. We're getting great results, and here's some results for people who have a look. And you see that basically we get proteins with enormous large precision. The great thing is, even so, we have a fixed distance to us. Since there are many contacts compete with each other, you get a better precision, better than the precision of your potential, because you're trying to satisfy all those constraints. So you do these things basically quite well as you put these diagrams to come together. This paper is coming out soon. And now we have been doing what happens with cases where you don't have enough sequence. Even if you don't have enough sequences, there are cases now we sort of mix together some other information with DCA data, and we have been able to find couplings of proteins that you know, for example, in the case of the NAF proteins, these deep proteins are very important in cancer. We can get structures now, and people now are designing drugs based on these things. By getting these structures, you align these things on what you know, and you use DCA sometimes to predict, sometimes differentiate possible choices. It's a great tool. That's one thing that's basically becoming very, very popular these days as we come along. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to finish soon, but I will just give an example of something I'm not going to work on it, but I'm going to show just 2 slides or 3 slides just to. Oh, I'm doing on time. Yes. No, I have 15, 17 here with 5. That's 22. I'm getting there, 22 minutes. But this is a case where basically, I just want to point this way. That's case of the case where you have interactions between, on this case, 2 component systems where you have kinase binding response regulators. And how you identify your response regulator. This is a particular good problem because there's a lot of people working in synthetic biology that are interested in this work. And also in bacteria, see, if they're close in the gene with the upper one, but then you know which pairs should be together, so you know how to align the seeds, right? So it's a nice, simple system to decide how to align all the sequences. So the question is how to identify these pairs. Now here, I want to push it and say, here you're running out of data, okay? And the question is how much you can do. So now I say, I believe this say that much. I'm such a believer that now I go beyond predicting context. I see what the probability of particular pairs of residues on that contact exists. And now I write the potential. That's minus 1 of the probability. So now is, and actually have papers with Peter Wallace on that. I'm trying to compare what we call statistical potentials that come from genomics versus real physical potentials. And they're very interesting things. Just for a short version, I think the result you can expect, the global signal is good. But to do on a single family of proteins is excellent. So there may be extra terms that on a single family is no problem to include because they're the same. So it's a great thing of these potentials. And I just want to point out a couple of things here. Let me go over the data fast. One that I want to just go to the next slide here. This slide here is we actually break our direct information into parts here. Just sorry about being too fast here, but I'm running out of time. One is I average over all sequences. And we expect, and that's what we call the new form. The new form, we expect them, if the signals we get on the new form, they're actually related to chemistry. All these things have phosphorylated X group, so there's conservation of pairs and interactions. They have to be satisfied for chemical reasons. So the new part is chemistry. And then you can see the red part agrees enormously well is what you observe on the structural prediction of mutations on these things. So it's a great signal. Let me give an example just in the next slide, and then I stop. Here you see, for example, here's a situation where I've got a bunch of regulators, and that tells you how powerful this method is. The question is what this shape means. It's basically these units here, how we convert the I into a real energy. I think that basically comparison of units is what we call KT select, the selection temperature on sequence space. That's something we don't have time to do it. But you see that the method does quite well on getting the right pairs, but also show that ACCs are not hell specific, nobody binds to anything else. Now removing the rule really improves the signal, as you can see here. And there are some things more about, but I think since things have this box, what these things means on the details is the interesting part. But I will stop here to see about how you can push this method, you can put this way, you can predict structure, you can predict function, but now you can start to design proteins, design interfaces, and try to figure out which might better do mutation studies if you really believe on that potential. So with that said, let me thank all the people that have been doing the work. I remember I was in Italy a few months ago, and people said, if you travel so much, who does the work when you're traveling? I always see the same people do the work when I'm not traveling. So I have to thank all of that as a successful group, and thank you for your attention.
Two questions.
Quick question. In the evolutionary studies, do you just use functional the mutations that lead to functional proteins? And if so, can you use the non-functional information?
So, okay, that's a very interesting question. In our field, we use the information that's available to us. So if the protein is able to fold of that shape, we expect to have a signal. Clearly, most of these things were coming evolutionary are reasons to have survived. But in principle, I think you can create information by doing some laboratory sequence that can fold that shape, arbitrary, that would be useful information also. They should give the signal if things able to fold the shape that they want.
Currently, it's blind.
It's blind information. Yes?
That was really interesting, thank you. I was wondering, do you gain any insight from the invariant correlations, from the global information?
Okay. So let's be honest and the dishonest answer. The honest answer is we haven't looked at that much. In some cases, you're starting to observe, it's interesting. Now we have a postdoc that starts to say, can we figure out some functional business where they interact with information, okay? And we don't know the answer. We start to look at that thing. Because one thing that this area works well is because you're not getting one context of your life, you have multiple contexts. So if your data is not perfect, the fact that multiple contexts can really help you to improve your result as coming up. But your point is well taken. And what we don't know yet is how much sequence and how much information we need. And then the question is asked about functional part versus non-functional part becomes more relevant. Right? So the question we are trying, we don't have the result, but the point.
Thanks.